Educational Communications and this station present Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman. On this series, we explore the effects of human influence on the Earth's ecosystems and discuss solutions to environmental problems which affect the quality of life on this planet. Environmental Directions gives you the kind of information you need to help you participate in decisions impacting your community, the nation, and the world. Now, here's your host, Nancy Pearlman.
Hello. For the next half hour, we're going to be talking about public lands, especially around Santa Barbara and California, as well as Alaska, with my guest, Professor Deborah Williams. She is a lecturer in the Environmental Studies Department at the University of California at Santa Barbara. She was formerly Special Assistant to the Secretary of the Interior for Alaska, which was a presidential appointment. And she has been an attorney for the National Park Service and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. She is also Vice Chair of Goleta Parks and Recreation Commission and Partnership Council and Community Environmental Council. And she has written the website 50greatpubliclanddestinations.org. Welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today.
You are certainly involved in trying to save and preserve public lands and waters, both from a law and a policy position as well as an activist position. You want people to enjoy our public lands, and I was fascinated to look at this website and see all the opportunities from hiking to bicycling, swimming, watching wildlife, historic and cultural activities, camping from the Los Padres National Forest all the way up to Yosemite National Park, to the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area, to our Channel Islands. There are so many incredible public spaces with beautiful plant and animal life, ecosystems, cultural and natural history. Can you begin by telling me how you decided to include what sites? Because there are so many. You've got the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument, you've got the Antelope Valley, California Poppy Reserve, you have the Manzanar National Historic Site from Southern California into the Owens Valley. They're so different. What do they include?
Thank you, Nancy, for describing the website so well and enthusiastically. I wanted to jump in and rediscover all of California's public lands within 300 miles of UCSB. I like to emphasize that we are all owners of our public lands. We are the owners. And to think that almost 50% of California is in public land ownership, both federal, state, county, and local. So there is so much to explore. In the website, I wanted to emphasize the diversity of our public lands. As you pointed out, we have everything from wilderness to archaeological sites to historic sites to parks and refuges, state, local, and federal. I wanted people to know about and to be able to visit and relish what we collectively own, and which gives California some of its greatest and most special assets for our mental, physical, ecological health.
I have been to many of those that you present, but you had incredible pictures and information about them that even for those people like me who have visited the places can learn more and want to go back and see more. The lands are in various ownerships from city, county, state, federal. Does it make a difference who is managing the land in terms of how it's preserved and protected?
It can, but for example, the federal government and California state government have a full spectrum of public lands. California has designated wilderness areas, just like the federal government. California has areas that focus on fish and wildlife protection, just like the federal government. California, the state of, has archaeological sites and historic sites, just like the federal government. State, county, and local also really emphasize more local park opportunities, oftentimes recreational and developed park opportunities, but you can find all of them across the board. I do, for each site that I list, have a website that connects the reader with the particular state, local, or county public website.
Let's talk about a few of those sites because there are unique resources in each and every one of them. The California state flower is the poppy. So if you go to the Antelope Valley, it's important to go in the springtime when you can see the poppy. The land is beautiful at other times, but you're not going to see that gorgeous color, are you?
I dare say going to the Antelope Valley and visiting the State Poppy Reserve, especially during a super bloom, which we might have one this year, or really any time in the spring, is one world-class experience.
Each and every one of these sites, one can experience unique features, unique history, unique wildlife. I have been to Yosemite National Park many times. I've climbed and hiked in the backcountry, backpacked there. I've been in the valley, but yet wintertime is different than summertime. So even in very famous places like that, you can get a different experience according to the weather.
That is exactly right. There are so many treasures in each and every one of these public lands, and to be able to visit them at various times of year and to be focused on different aspects of them really provides a continuously enriching experience.
I grew up in the surfing culture of the 60s, and I heard about Rincon. It's a famous surfing area. It's a park. Are the waves still there?
Oh, yes. Rincon continues to be a mecca location for surfers, but also for people who not only enjoy watching the surfers any time of the year that there are waves, and they're generally good surfing waves, particularly when they have the annual surfing competition, which is really exciting to watch. But Rincon also has beautiful beaches to explore, wildlife, picnicking, and other opportunities. Rincon is a very special destination.
Point Mugu is on the border of Los Angeles County and Ventura County. It is special to the Chumash people, who were the indigenous tribes here in Southern California, as the heart of meeting the world. Can you explain the significance?
Point Mugu is one of the most significant areas on the coast, but there are also many other additional significant sites for the Chumash Indians. That has been so exciting to discover. And may I recommend to people, particularly those who might be coming to the Santa Barbara area anyway, to go to Chumash Painted Caves. It is a fabulous place to visit in a lovely area where you really get a sense of, you could imagine going back thousands of years, living there and envisioning the artists who did the paintings in the caves. Going back to Point Mugu, though, as you pointed out, because of its rich ecosystem, it was a critically important gathering place. And when you are there, you can feel that richness.
There's another park that you mentioned that I believe has an indigenous tribal name, and I can't pronounce it. Anisquoyo. It's ANISQ''OYO''. How do you pronounce it, and what does it mean?
You did quite well. The area where UCSB is located and Isla Vista was another critically important area for the Chumash. The whole coastline was rich with resources, marine mammal resources, so many streams filled with steelhead, so many berries, and of course acorns. And so it's not surprising that the Chumash thrived in these areas. Different areas had, of course, resources, such as the Carpinteria area was very rich in tar. And there is other tar along the coast here, natural tar seeps, that was critical to making their seaworthy vessels and also lining some cooking and other implements.
These lands are also important to other species, not just to humans, because areas that are set aside as preserves or wilderness or parks don't generally have the human buildings and roads that destroy the ecosystems and habitats that they depend on. And one of the last places for A major endangered species that I recall trying to save back in the 80s is the California condor, and the Los Padres National Forest is the last resource. At one time, they took the condors that were left, put them into a captive breeding program, which seemed to have succeeded because they reintroduced them. How many birds are there? Because I've hiked in that forest and I haven't been lucky enough. I keep looking up in the sky and on the cliffs trying to find them.
Well, let me make a specific recommendation to you and your listenership. That is, if you want to see California condors, I think you have the highest chance of seeing them at Pinnacles National Park. You might also be lucky to see them at Los Padres National Forest. But Pinnacles National Park, when we visited it, we were at the top of the Pinnacles, and we had, at noontime, as we were enjoying the snack, 12 California condors soaring overhead.
So lucky.
Oh, my goodness. But I've had so many other people report similar experiences. Theodore Roosevelt actually designated that area as a national monument when he was president. And Congress turned it into a national park really fairly recently. It is a gem. I can't recommend it enough. And as you correctly said, the California condor reintroduction story is one of the wonderful success stories that we have in California and is now extended to Arizona.
In a half hour, we certainly don't have time to talk about every single site that you have encouraged people to go out and enjoy and see and experience, and that we need to be sure to continue to preserve and protect. Perhaps you could mention some other places in your 50 Great Public Lands Destinations, Santa Barbara and beyond.org.
Thank you. There's so many wonderful places to explore. The Los Padres National Forest is full of fabulous places, but one area I would especially like to highlight is the Sesame Wilderness in Piedra Blanca portion of the Los Padres National Forest. It is so special and gorgeous, and to be able to scramble around the rocks and then also get into the wilderness and be adjacent to one of California's few wild and scenic rivers, although it's, a small river, is enriching. I also really, really do recommend strongly enjoying our vast coastal dune area, including the Rancho Guadalupe Dune Preserve. It is beautiful. If one goes, you want to really get back into the dunes, and you will be so surprised when you get back into these beautiful dunes that also have some history with respect to movie making. You will see these valleys that are dune valleys that are filled with wildflowers and other vegetation. It's so surprising and special. I highly recommend going to visit the elephant seals and the sea lions at Piedras Blancas State Marine Reserve. It is near Hearst Castle. You will be amazed to see hundreds, depending on when you are there, of elephant seals and sea lions. You can go any time of the year to see different periods of their life cycle, but oh my goodness, the watchable wildlife aspect of being there is remarkable.
And lakes are important too. There's a Lake Los Caneros Natural Reserve. Who operates that, and what is that designation as compared to parks and forests and wilderness?
Lake Los Caneros is a public lands that I visit once a week. Goleta City has this area. It's an open space area that's within Goleta and managed by the Goleta government. As a member of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Goleta, it is an area that I have focused on and care deeply about. It is actually a lake that is created by a small dam. It was a historic site both for the Shumatch and then for early California history. At one point, there was a small dam created there for cattle grazing and water. It has expanded. It is a migratory stop-off area for a lot of birds, so the bird watching there is very special. There's also historic structures that are great fun and some railroad heritage and other things. But the lake is just a beautiful place to look at the Santa Ynez Mountains and to do bird watching and to enjoy people enjoying it. I'm excited. We are about to launch a major master plan process.
And every one of these locations have stories to share about their history, about what's there, have beautiful sights and sounds to enjoy. And we're going to talk more about our public lands here in Southern California as well as in Alaska when we return in a moment with my guest, Professor Deborah Williams, who has prepared the website 50greatpubliclanddestinations.org.
Environmental Directions with Nancy Pearlman continues with further discussion of the world's critical ecological issues. For more information, you may call 310-559-9160 or go to www.ecoprojects.org. Now, here's Nancy.
I'm speaking with Professor Deborah Williams. She is a lecturer in the Environmental Studies Department at the University of California at Santa Barbara. Obviously, staying on the mainland, you can enjoy beaches, lakes, rivers, mountains, forests, all sorts of different kinds of places, history, but Southern California is unique, too, in having the Channel Islands. How many islands are there? They're under different ownership. I remember getting special permission back in the early 1970s going onto San Nicolas Island, which belonged to the Navy, and photographing some incredible wildlife. Abalone, 3 on top of each other, and abalone is practically gone along the mainland coast.
Yes, we're so fortunate to have the Channel Islands National Park, as well as the surrounding Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. There are 5 islands that are in the Channel Islands National Park that are protected for all of us to use and enjoy. So it's a highly protected and very special area. The nickname for Channel Islands National Park is the Galapagos of the North Pacific. Some of the islands have an especially large abundance of marine mammals. It is a place that you can access by boat. I highly recommend it. There's also a really remarkable and endangered species success story involving the Channel Islands fox.
I remember going over to Catalina Island when they reintroduced that species back onto the island.
Yes. And one of my favorite memories is camping on Channel Islands without being in a tent and in the middle of the night hearing this and waking up with a Channel Island fox sniffing my ear.
Very close and personal.
You are able to, you don't have to have that experience, but you're able to have an abundance of wonderful experiences there. It is a gem.
It's also important to remember that Santa Barbara to Los Angeles and north of Santa Barbara is along a coastline, and the water resources are incredible. You mentioned that we have a national marine sanctuary, and it's not just the migrating gray whales that you might see going from Baja California to Alaska passing by, but there are other species that are there. The otter used to be abundant. I hope that they're having a comeback, but there are so many other plants, including major kelp beds, that need preservation, and of course the animals, and we have to be sure not to have the oil drilling and the pollution that threatens the species in the water.
As we speak, the Department of Commerce and NOAA are considering the creation of a new national sanctuary, and that is the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, in large part to protect the area north of the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, and the boundaries are, an open question, to make sure that this area is protected against oil and gas development and other deleterious development. We do, in California, have such a rich marine heritage, as well as, of course, a terrestrial heritage. We are so fortunate indeed. Our wildflower heritage is an extraordinarily inspirational one, and this could be an especially great spring for wildflowers. We talked earlier about the Antelope Valley California Poppy Reserve, but there is another area, actually 2 areas, that I want to really encourage people to explore. One is Carrizo Plain National Monument. Carrizo Plain National Monument, the wildflowers there, especially during the super bloom, are so amazing that you can see them from space. if one looks at the website, one will see some pictures of the vast expanse of wildflowers. That area is also most interesting because the San Andreas Fault runs directly through it, and you literally can see the San Andreas Fault. But there's also rich cultural heritage there that is so exciting to explore and more. It's beautiful, and I highly recommend it. One other area that some people may be more familiar with, but is so worthy of visiting, and that's Anza Borrego State Park. The wildflowers there are spectacular, and there are so many fun areas to explore, including slot canyons. It is a gem.
You have spent many, many years in Alaska. You were appointed by the president as a special assistant to the Secretary of Interior for Alaska. You have been involved in those national Alaska issues, and those issues are still relevant to us today and are still controversial, especially regarding the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and the Tongass National Forest. Tell me about the proposals in those areas and what is so important, because to me, the Tongass, one of the last large rainforests in America, should be preserved and protected. And the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is critical to the wildlife and the caribou and the other animals for which it was set aside. And it wasn't set aside for oil development, and yet that is what is constantly being threatened there.
And I would just like to emphasize, as I noted earlier, we are the owners of our public lands. These are national public lands. Everyone in California has an equal stake in the future of those public lands in Alaska because they are national public lands. You've pointed out two of the most iconic public land areas in the nation, in the world, and the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge is the largest national wildlife refuge in the nation, and the Tongass National Forest is the largest by far national forest in the nation. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge was actually first set aside by President Eisenhower. President Eisenhower and his Secretary of Interior understood the extraordinary ecosystem there and wanted to protect it. And he wanted to protect it because he set it aside in 1959, just before the state of Alaska was able to begin selecting land after becoming a state that would become state lands. He wanted to protect it as national lands for all of us to enjoy forever. And of course, in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, in addition to being the birthing grounds for the wonderful porcupine caribou herd, the extraordinary porcupine caribou herd that's not only important ecologically, but also is critically important to the Gwich'in people. They are the caribou people, and they call the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge the place where life begins, essential to the Gwich'in people. The Arctic National Wildlife Refuge also has the most polar bear of any place in the United States. And of course, with the threats of climate change and the impacts on polar ice, the denning sites on land are increasingly essential to polar bear survival. And protecting those denning sites, not impacting those denning sites with oil and gas development, is essential. This is an area to protect, not to develop for oil and gas development. Unfortunately, after decades of successfully protecting the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge against oil and gas development, Congress slipped into the quote-unquote tax relief bill a provision to develop the coastal plain of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and demanded that 2 lease sales take place. There actually was a lease sale that took place, and virtually no one showed up. Congress had predicted that it would make hundreds of millions of dollars, and it only came in at $12 million with no major oil companies. It was an embarrassment and a disaster, and acreage in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge was sold for $25. $25 an acre. Some of the most important ecosystems in the world. The Biden administration has stopped all progress on the lease sales, but Congress must repeal that legislation.
In fact, you wrote a superb opinion editorial in the Los Angeles Times pointing out that that sale really netted even less if you consider that they spent $3 million for the auction and only netted a few million, and yet the value of land and wildlife is worth trillions if we really want to put a value on it. And you understand these issues because you have worked in so many different areas. You were attorney for the National Park Service and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. When you were at the Harvard Law School, you co-founded the Harvard Environmental Law Review. You currently even volunteer as Vice Chair at Goleta Parks and Recreation Commission, Partnership Council, Community Environmental Council, and of course you have another website, sbearthday.org. I guess SB is Santa Barbara Earth Day because you still promote that Earth Day is every day, as we all environmentalists believe that we have to work to reduce one's carbon footprint and take personal action, whether or not it's how we use water, how we use material, energy, food. Is there any particular advice that you want to share with individuals in terms of action? Because it seems to me that one of the most important actions is to make sure that we don't continue to contribute to the extinction of species, that species are dying out every single day, and that we do need to preserve and protect them, especially the endangered and rare ones.
Yes, precisely, Nancy. Clearly, I'm passionate about public lands. But I came to realize quite a few years ago that the only way we can ultimately protect public lands is to address climate change, that our public lands are at significant risk if we don't get control of climate change, which ultimately leads to reducing our carbon footprints on an individual and collective basis. So I worked with Community Environmental Council here. There are 21 topics of ways to reduce your carbon footprint. I encourage people who want to consider strategies from reducing plastic use to reducing water to, of course, reducing electric use and more, to take a look at Earth Day every day.
I have been an environmental activist for decades, and I come from the anthropological point of view. And back in the 60s, we got the Wilderness Act, and in the 70s, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, we got the Endangered Species Act. We have laws on the books. You come in from being an attorney, from working in the legal area. Do you believe that we need any more laws, or we just need to enforce the laws better than we have been?
A combination of both. So we need to repeal some laws that were passed in the last few years, like drilling the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. We need some additional laws, especially in the area of climate change and reducing our carbon and methane and other footprints. But we also need to fully implement our existing laws. So we are in an existential crisis with respect to climate change, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem service loss. We need to employ every strategy at our disposal, both for ourselves, for future generations, and as you pointed out so articulately at the beginning, for all living things.
And while we are working to preserve and protect ecosystems and wildlife, we can also go out and enjoy, and that's why you created the website 50greatpubliclanddestinations.org. Perhaps you could summarize for us some of them, because you include everything from dunes like Rancho Guadalupe Dunes Preserve to historic sites like the Manzanar, where the Japanese Americans were forced to stay during World War II. You mentioned so many other places. Even the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area has everything from cultural to natural resources and a combination of places to enjoy, recreate, learn, experience.
What scientists and others point out with increasing amount of research, and we know ourselves, is that getting out and enjoying the outdoors is essential to our mental and physical health. It also enhances personal relationships, family relationships, and creates incredible memories. We have in California, in the United States, this public lands heritage that really speaks to our natural heritage, our cultural heritage, and our historic heritage. It is enriching at every level.
With those 50 destinations, I can go out every week and have an incredible experience, and I want to thank you so very much for letting us know what some of those places are. Thank you for being my guest.
It was a great pleasure, Nancy. Thank you so much.
I have been speaking with Professor Deborah Williams, who is a lecturer in the Environmental Studies Department at the University of California at Santa Barbara. I'm Nancy Pearlman. Thank you very much for joining us, and do tune in again next week.
If you would like free information about these environmental issues, go to www.ecoprojects.org or call 310-559-9160. Environmental Directions with your host, Nancy Pearlman, is a community affairs program of the nonprofit organization Educational Communications and this station.